Hey everyone, welcome to the show, My So-Called Fabulous. I'm Tiffany. I'm back and I listen to you. I promise I do. You have asked, you've sent questions on what you want to hear on this podcast, and narcissism, dealing with narcissists, men and women. Here it is. I'm bringing to you today this fabulous guest. I met her not long ago, Tatiana Miller, psychologist, at a function that Kelly Landcart puts on for us. And you are we made a connection immediately. So welcome to the show, Tatiana.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
I am thrilled. You and I getting ready for this show today. I wasn't worried at all because we hit it off the night we met, talking about narcissistic behavior. And I was asking you, do you know anyone that could help us with this? Because a lot of psychologists say, no, we can't because we have clients or patients that they're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a small town. This is a small town, right?
Yes,
in Fort Worth.
Yes,
but
it is.
Thank you for coming. So let's just dive in. I want to hear more about you and tell everyone about you, but let's dive into narcissistic behavior because I do have some questions, but is it a thing?
Sure. Yeah, no, of course it's a thing. And I think all of us have been around narcissists. I pulled up the latest statistics and it's 1 to 3 in every 200 people. Most of us in psychology agree that it's higher. So that's 1 to 5% of the population. And what we know about this is that most successful people in the business world will have some traits. Like I want to be clear that all of us have some traits here and there, right, of narcissism. And I don't want to paint anything of human beings as wrong or right. Right. I want to start out with that because most of us are who we are, right? The same way that we come programmed with the DNA that gives us our physical characteristics, human beings also come with psychological programming. And you and I discussed at the beginning of the show, it can be generational psychology traits that come through. And it can also just be that we have the brain, like psychopaths have a certain type of brain, and it can be triggered into where their behavior goes into psychopathic behavior. So I don't want people to listen to this and go, oh my gosh, I have some of these traits, I must be a narcissist. That's not how this works. I rather have listeners listen to this as sort of becoming more aware of what we should look for, what red flags we should look for, because when we're dealing with narcissists, it usually tends to be that they're very charismatic, right? Most people think, oh, narcissists are going to be unfriendly and they're not going to be easy to be around. And it's quite the opposite. Narcissists tend to be very charismatic. They pull people in, and that can be very confusing. So confusion when you're around people could be a red flag for, am I dealing with a narcissist? Because most of the time when we're regularly interacting with narcissists, we start to doubt ourselves.
Yes.
And that's a huge marker. So I'll put it to you this way. 18% of CEOs are most likely narcissists, according to research.
Unbelievable.
Which means that they do tend to get ahead in life is why I bring this up. And there's a reason for that, right? And the reason for this is that there's 5 life skills that narcissists will never master. And I think it's easier to understand what a narcissist is from this perspective. The first one is boundaries. They don't understand boundaries. So, for example, in a healthy relationship, Tiffany, you call me and you say, hey, I booked this super great reservation at this new restaurant and I want you to come on Tuesday. In a healthy relationship, I would say, I'm so sorry, that doesn't work for me. And you'd be like, okay, well, let's reschedule. With a narcissist, if you say no, now you're on the naughty list. They do not respect other people's boundaries. However, if you call them and say, I have this reservation on Tuesday, can you make it? And they say no, that's okay. So their boundaries are okay, but your boundaries are bad. In fact, they make you the enemy, especially in family dynamics. When there's a narcissist and family members have boundaries with the narcissist, you are not in a good place with them. So they're going to use things like anger, like guilt tripping, and those are 2 very common things. So red flags are, do I feel confused in this relationship? Do I feel guilty when I deal with this person? And do I end up feeling like I did something wrong? Like those are all red flags.
Yes.
That brings us to, if we then try to bring it up to that person, hey, Tiffany, why did you stop talking to me because I couldn't go to lunch with you. And you're like, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to make you feel bad. That's having empathy, right? Narcissists are unable to have empathy. So that is a lot of people's frustration, right? Because when we are able to have empathy, it's hard for us to wrap our head around how somebody else couldn't. How could they be so cold? I often get that question. And I always try to explain it to people that it's about capacity, right? It's like, how much water can I put in this glass?
Right.
And if empathy had to do with how much water I could put in this glass, just understand that narcissists don't have room for water. It's not a part of who they are. Doesn't exist. So they see you as a pawn in their means or their goals. And that's when you're useful. You are useful as long as you respect their boundaries and you're validating whatever they need at the time. So a lot of narcissists tend to interrupt, overpower people in conversations or in situations, which is why they get ahead a lot of times as CEOs, right? They're the big boss and nobody even thinks about questioning them.
Right.
And that's where enabling comes in. But again, that makes you question, right? If I'm right and they were disrespectful to me, why will they not even admit it? So that brings me to my third life skill that they'll never be able to master, which is accountability. A narcissist will never ever admit that they made a mistake or that they're vulnerable or that they're sorry.
Oh, gosh.
Which then triggers that shift of blame, right, back onto the person. So that's more confusing, makes them doubt themselves more. And that's technically what gaslighting is, right?
Now I know.
Yeah. Yeah. And so accountability requires humility and self-reflection. So remember, it's about self-capacity, right? They don't have the capacity to do that. So when you asked me the question that a listener had about, is it worth it to confront a narcissist? Well, that depends on how much energy you have, right? How many times can you run the same marathon? Because the finish line, the goalpost for a narcissist is always going to be changing. So if you have an expendable amount of energy that never ends, go ahead and confront that narcissist. But you're talking to them about something that they don't have the capacity to ever master or understand.
Right.
And that's a hard thing to accept for people that are not narcissists. Because for us, it's like, how could you not apologize to your daughter? How could you not, understand why your wife is suffering? How could you not understand why you're burning your people out? They don't. They just do not understand.
Don't get it.
They do not get it.
Unlock style clarity like never before with the help of the SWB agency, founded by stylist Bonnie Smith. They offer services both in person and online using their fully virtual platform. Here you learn to love your wardrobe again. Develop your style and shop curated pieces from your very own stylist. I've used the SWB agency for years and I cannot describe how great it is to have fully styled outfits. Available and ready in a snap. For more information, visit www.theswbagency.com. Again, that's www.theswbagency.com. Link is also included in the show notes.
That brings us to the fourth life skill that they'll never be able to master, which is compromise. It is their way or the highway. It's that simple. And again, you're a pawn, right? So as long as they need you, then they're going to make you feel like they're willing to compromise, but really it's their way or the highway. Then the fifth thing that narcissists will never be able to master is they'll never show weakness. And that's why they tend to be in control of relationships, of family dynamics, of corporations, of government.
Yes.
Is because they show strength.
Right.
And most people seek strength, right? Human beings seek to be around people that they feel safe with.
Right.
And they don't understand that it's all a front. And it's not necessarily a front that those people are like thinking about at night, like, how do I do this? How do I, be the best narcissist I can be? They're not doing that at all. They're just being who they are.
They're living their best life.
That's right.
Ugh.
While we're all there suffering, going, what's wrong with me? Why is this relationship so hard?
Right.
Yeah.
And Tatiana, this is abuse, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, it's abuse. It's abuse when we don't learn to have our boundaries with narcissists. So it can be emotional abuse. It typically is emotional abuse, which can be verbal abuse, which could be gaslighting, which could be any game of power and control. So a lot of times in families, it'll happen with children will be validated when they're doing, acting, looking like the narcissist wants them to. And so then they're validated, they're on the good list, they're the good son or the good daughter. And as soon as the child wants to have their own identity, which is a really common thing that happens in families where the mom or the dad are narcissists, for the most part, narcissists are men, like 75% of narcissists tend to be men. And what will happen is the children can't form their own identity because they're not allowed to. They feel so pressured and are told, this is the mold you have to fit in. And it's the one the narcissist decides or wants at the time or is convenient to them. And so the children never have the opportunity to create their own identity or do their own thing. And so they often will become extremely dependent on the narcissist. And that's the abusive part.
Right.
Because when we force people to become dependent on us and we don't give them the tools to have their own path, make their own decisions, have their own critical thinking, have their own accountability, right? Because the narcissist game is, if you need me, then I matter and I'm in control.
For sure.
And healthy parenting is, can you spread your wings and fly on your own?
Yes.
And so it becomes a toxic dynamic in the family. And that is abusive, right? Toxic relationships and dynamics in families are cycles of abuse that tend to be generational.
You mentioned that earlier. It is. It does tend to be genetic.
Yeah. Well, genetic or modeled. So all children. In fact, I just had a conversation the other day with my friend Maja, who's a clinical director. She's also a psychology professor at Texas Wesleyan. And she was saying to me how she was trying to teach people that are in school to become psychologists that it's really important that we always have operational definitions. So like I have a 12-year-old, right? And he'll be told like, you have to study for your test. And so I called the school and I said, okay, you're telling these kids they have to study for their test. Can we set an operational definition for study? Right? Children have to be taught everything.
Yes.
They have to be role modeled everything. So you literally have to sit down with them and be like, this is how you study. This is what studying means.
Right.
So when you say, is it genetic? It can be, but all genetics have to have a trigger.
Right.
A lot of times the trigger is that the role modeling, right? The operational definitions of how do I do life. If you're a grandiose narcissist, you're going to walk into a room, you're going to be super loud, you're going to tell jokes, you're going to take charge of the room, and people are going to like you.
Everyone loves them.
Right.
Yep.
And be enthralled by you. So the child learns that this is how I get what I want. And so they learn to do that. And that's a learned behavior.
Right.
And if they don't have a role model to counter that says, hey, like, it's not okay to always interrupt people. It's not okay to try to control people, and kind of counters that and brings balance into that child's psyche. All they're going to learn is this is how I get what I want and this is how I do life.
Right.
And that's where entitlement comes in.
And you know, we talk about the children, going back to the children, the kids can leave eventually. They can go on their own. They can escape this. The partner, not necessarily. And I want to really circle that because I did have a follower asking me, they read in multiple places that 50% stay in a relationship. What are the statistics? What are your thoughts about that? Because once again, the kids can leave, the mom or the dad possibly can or cannot.
Yeah, I think this is the same dilemma with any kind of abuse. It is easy for us on the outside to say, wow, this is a horrible situation. They should leave. But when you're in it, it's almost like you have blinders on. So think of those horses, that you see with the blinders on, because the narcissist has changed the scope that they have of themselves and their possibilities in their life to be so narrow that they believe that their happiness, their well-being depends on them being with the narcissist. And it's very toxic and very painful to watch for people that we love that are in those relationships. But here is the hard conversation around that. It is a choice to stay in an abusive relationship. So in order for a person to be able to walk away, there's work that needs to be done. There's that self-awareness to say, is this good for me? Why do I choose to stay? Is it that I am scared? Is it that I've become financially dependent? And this tends to be a really typical pattern for narcissists, is that because they tend to be successful in the business world, they tend to be able to rope their partners into financial dependency and their children, right? And so I remember a professor I had, and I think this is one of and I even tell my students when I teach, I'm like, if you remember one thing from this course, let me tell you what one professor told me. And this is 20 years ago. He said, guys, if you want to understand the world, you need to understand 3 things. Everything in life revolves around 3 things: sex, power, and money.
Yep.
Period. End of story.
Period.
Period. End of story. So I've even heard and read case studies where people stay in narcissistic relationships because they're like, it's the best sex of my life.
Yeah.
And that's what keeps them there.
Ugh.
And I've also read a ton of case studies. Most case studies, people are like, I live a great life. Why would I leave this?
For sure.
It's going to be more expensive for us to get a divorce. I hear this all the time. It's going to be more expensive for us to get a divorce, and I'll lose my lifestyle than for me to go live a healthy life.
Right.
So again, that's part of the confusion. That's part of the chaos that's formed when we're living in a narcissistic environment, is that we lose clarity. We start to think that how we live is normal, and human beings will cling to what they know. It is scarier for us to go explore things that we don't know than for us to stay with what we know, even if it's not good for us.
So the narcissist is not going to break the cycle.
Why would they?
Right. It's a Shangri-La.
I mean, yeah.
But the partner or the children have to break the cycle, right? Because I've heard that from multiple people on this podcast when we're talking about mental health. You have to break the cycle, right?
Absolutely.
I can't do this anymore. If it's dating or shopping or whatever the case may be, breaking the cycle, and that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a famous meme. It used to be a story about feeding the tiger, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if every day the tiger comes up to your house and you give it food, guess what? The tiger is going to keep coming to your house and eating off your porch.
Yeah.
But if you choose to stop feeding it, it's going to go feed somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where people that are in these situations need to ask themselves, what is the tiger giving me?
For sure.
Yes, the tiger is scary and has sharp teeth and all this stuff, but I'm still walking up to the door feeding it.
Right.
And so we're feeding the cycle. We're participating in it. And it's very difficult as children, especially, to have to widen our perspective and say, my mom or my dad are also allowing it. Yes, there is the perpetrator that's contributing and creating this environment, but the other person is also choosing to allow it. And a lot of times, historically, what we see is that the children will be more upset with the victim than with the perpetrator. As the children get older and more aware, they'll put more of the blame on the person that allowed it rather than the person that's doing it.
That you allowed this to happen in our lifetime.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm not even sure how to ask this, but are there any known narcissists in therapy?
Oh, yeah. So, so
Success.
but that doesn't mean they change. Right. So if you've ever seen The Sopranos.
Yes.
Okay, I love that show. So Tony Soprano, he's a narcissist.
Okay.
Right? Like to the book. And he's in therapy.
Oh.
Do you remember that?
Yes.
Like there's so many episodes where he's in therapy and he doesn't change. He continues to be in the mafia. He continues to do what he do what he does. But the reason he's in therapy is because he starts to have panic attacks.
Oh.
He starts to have panic attacks. So that's what he's trying to do. And then the wife leaves him, right? Actually, Carmela in that show, it's a great show if you want to understand narcissists. She finally goes, no, this is not okay, right? And starts to call him out. But if you watch the show, you see how she's just enthralled in the lifestyle and this and that. He kind of stays out of her way. And that's the other thing. For some relationships, there's a period and season in our marriage where it's convenient for a partner to stay out of our way, right? And they only use us when they need.
Right.
And then the children leave and we're less busy. And then a lot of reality set in, right? As to the reality of the relationship.
Exactly.
But yeah, so they can be in therapy, but there's a really famous doctor named Dr. Ramani. And she does a lot of videos, and she's written a lot of books about narcissists. That's sort of like her niche. And she's the first one to tell you, like, don't have high hopes that they'll change. What they'll do to keep you hooked, right? So if a narcissist sees that you're starting to have boundaries and you're starting to not allow their behavior, they'll sort of make you feel like, oh, yeah, I'm going to be different. Oh, yeah, until they hook you back in. And once you're sucked back into the cycle, then everything's the same.
Right.
And that's part of the abusive part.
Do they ever use the word, oh, I'll change? No, because
they usually don't have accountability. They might if they really need you. If they really need you for something. Like if something is vested on you showing up to an event, or, they don't want the outside world to know the reality of the situation, right? They might tell you what you want to hear because they know that's what you want to hear. But remember, actions have to match words. So I might say, Tiffany, I'm sorry, yes, I'll change. And 2 minutes later, I'm doing the same thing I always did.
Right. And they may not even know.
No, they don't. Remember, it's really hard for narcissists to take the time to have true self-reflection.
I do that all the time.
Right.
I self-reflect, I think, sometimes. So it drives me crazy. Yeah. So I'm not a narcissist.
No. No.
I bet you could point them out quickly, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure. But I think, too, you and I were discussing, it's important for us to discuss the difference between being selfish, which all human beings are at a certain point, and we should be, especially with self-care. There's a difference between being selfish and being a narcissist.
Right.
So a lot of people will confuse being a narcissist with selfish behavior.
Right.
And so there's a distinction there. So a selfish person will maybe be self-centered. And there's seasons of our life. I mean, think of teenagers.
Oh,
right? That's the selfish season of our life.
Right.
But then we grow out of it,
right?
And we can still be selfish and have boundaries. We can be selfish and be empathetic. We can be selfish and be accountable. We can be selfish and compromise. We can be selfish and show weakness.
Right.
So you always have to look at, is this person have a pattern of the 5 life skills I said that they're never going to be able to master? That's how you know. And then there's also a lot of people now that are very entitled. That doesn't mean they're narcissists. Right? That just means they think they deserve because they've never been taught that they have to do A, B, and C to get D.
Right.
And so those are 2 distinctions I think that are important for people to remember.
Absolutely. We were talking about, and I wrote the question down, do we all have narcissistic tendencies? And you said yes, because I ask you this because a phase of my life and, growth. I'm 59 years old, so growth. I would actually say in a relationship, whatever the relationship would be, I would say, but I've done this for you and I've done that for you. And then you're doing this to me. This is what happens. And it may be with a partner, a team member, whatever the case may be. I'm learning to change my words, and hopefully this is true, because I don't want to be that narcissistic tendency to just not say anything, just change my actions and create my boundaries, right? Because if I've done something for you, that's on me, right?
Right.
That's me.
Right.
They didn't ask me to do that.
Right.
Well, they might have, but
yeah.
But
but I think that comes down to remembering that anytime we have expectations of others, we're setting ourselves up for failure.
I love that.
Because that's where I feel like relationships can go sour, or we have these big disappointments, is because I think this is operational definition, right? I think and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
This is something pretty common that my husband and I really had to learn to work through, because I come from a really warm, lively, what we call a warm culture, right? And this happens a lot with cross-cultural relationships. And he comes from sort of the U.S. culture, right? Very individualistic, very we call it a blue culture, which is very much drier and much like rational and process oriented. And so something as simple as like having dinner, right? To him is a transaction, like it's to get my nutrition. And to me, it's like, no, this is a 2-3 hour affair with my family, right? This is when we talk and we play and we listen to music and we do these things. And so even things as simple as like, how do we share meals together, right? There should be like, what's my understanding of that versus your understanding of that? And then how can we compromise?
Yes.
And get what we both need. And so I think expectations often are where people be like, oh, well, you're a narcissist. When really it's just, we're not talking about the same thing.
Right.
My husband just wanting to eat and get up and move on about his day does not mean he's a narcissist. It just means this is what he knows. This is what he thinks is supposed to happen. And I had a different idea coming into it. I had a different expectation coming into it.
Right.
So I think that's where it is healthier for us to not have expectations of others. And that's where you can have a relationship with a narcissist. I don't want people to think, so a lot of times I've seen or heard people that are like, well, I just figured out that my mom or my dad are a narcissist, so I can never have a relationship with them. Here's what happens with children of narcissists. They desperately need validation. Desperately. They need validation from the narcissist because there's an innate knowing in the child that they're never going to be good enough for that person, because that person controls and overpowers by making others feel like they're better than they are. And so these children will do everything they can to get the narcissist to say, good job, to get the narcissist to say, I see you. Yeah. That's basically what they need.
I'm proud of you.
I see you. I hear you and you matter.
Right.
And a narcissist will never do that.
Oh.
And so these kids spend their whole life wanting that validation, and they're never going to get it.
Right.
So that's where expectations are so important, right? If we can release that expectation and get that validation from people that are able to do it. Remember, a narcissist isn't able to do it, but it's still important for our hearts, if you have narcissists in your life, to meet them where they can meet you. Right. And that's where you have to really have some thick skin and understand that when you need to have boundaries, they're not going to like it.
Let's talk about these children that leave the nest. What is the percentage, or what are your thoughts on, are they going to choose a partner that is a narcissist?
Oh, very likely.
Oh, no, ma'am.
Very likely. Unless
yes,
they've had some therapy or done some self-reflection or had some moments. I have loved teaching college classes because it brings me back to this freshness in life. Do you remember how excited you were when you were like 18, 19 and you were like thinking all these things were possible in life, right? And I hope that most people feel that way. But it brings me back to this place of like, there's hope.
Yes.
There's hope.
Right.
And there's hope because I watch my students. I just taught a general psychology class this semester, and I watched them. I asked them just yesterday, what was your favorite part about this course? And they said the self-realization moments, right? Those moments that we had in class where it was like, oh, that's why I do this. That's why I do that. Yeah, aha moments.
Wow.
And so I think that when we start to focus on, which is one of my life passions, teaching young people emotional intelligence, right? Emotional intelligence is self-awareness, self-reflection, self-regulation, and then social awareness, right? When we start teaching that as a core subject, like we do math and reading, then kids are able to be in their dynamic at home and say, okay, I'm seeing this, but my awareness, my reflection, and my ability to self-regulate tells me I don't have to do that.
Right.
But we're not giving kids these skills.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that there is hope. I think there's definitely hope, but I also think that people have to want to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a learned process to have emotional intelligence.
It is.
And remember, that's what narcissists will not have.
No, it's not going to change.
Right.
So if you could give one piece of advice to the, you and I said we hate the word victim, but what do we call it?
Well, I think it's the receiver is what I call
Receiver,
it. Right? Like,
yes.
In any relationship, we're giving and we're receiving. And sometimes it's, it should be a give and a take.
Sure.
But with a narcissist, it's always a take and take and take and take and take and take. And sure, they will manipulate you through material things, or they'll give you a little bit of verbal validation, especially covert narcissists. So we haven't talked about that. Let's talk about that real quick. So grandiose narcissists are what everybody thinks Donald Trump is, right? Just big, bold.
Right.
What does he say? I'm winning.
Right.
Like just big, bold, loud, takes over a room, does what he wants. That's a grandiose narcissist. A covert narcissist, though, these are our most dangerous narcissists. And here's why. They're meek, usually. They're not going to be taking over a room. They're going to be the person that is trying to play nice. They're going to be the ones that use passive aggressiveness as their weapon of choice. And what does that mean? That means that they'll triangulate, right? So I'll go to you to talk about the person I'm trying to control, to try and get you to make her do what I need and make me look like the victim. So covert narcissists make themselves look like the victims. Like, well, I only did that because I was standing up for so-and-so, or they made me do it because it's not right. And covert narcissists are the ones that you never know where you stand. Right? They're the ones that people describe as, I have to walk on eggshells with them because I don't know if we're in the honeymoon stage or we're in the punishment stage. And there tends to be very marked honeymoon stages and punishment stages. So it's almost like a bipolar relationship.
Oh, gosh.
And so they'll use passive aggressiveness. They'll never be like grandiose narcissists. They're going to be in your face.
Right.
Like, this is what's happening and this is what you need to do.
Right.
Covert narcissists are behind the scenes trying to manipulate you to do things. And they'll use things like triangulation. I mentioned that. And that's where the kids get caught. So they'll use the kids or third parties, right, in families to manipulate the kids or manipulate the spouse, or put the kid against the wife. Like, all of these things are very normal for covert narcissists. And then they also will do dishonest encouragement. So if they need something from you, they'll say things like, oh, Tiffany, you're so amazing. You have the best podcast in the world. I just love watching it, even though they've never watched it, right? So they're just like telling you what you want to hear. And then they'll be like, and you need to have me on next week because I want to talk about this.
Right.
That's a covert narcissist.
Oh, goodness.
Right. And so they're going to give you that dishonest encouragement, all because they're using you for what they want,
what they need.
And those are the most dangerous because they appear to be oh so nice and oh so sweet.
Everyone loves them.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I know several of those. I'm so happy I don't have to live with him. I couldn't do it. It's the energy. And it's, you said at the beginning of the show, how much energy do you have to stay? And I know when people are saying, well, there's financial and so, but to be happy, right? I mean, everyone deserves to be happy.
Well, I always ask, like, return on investment.
Hey,
What's your return on your investment?
ROI, for
Because
sure.
you can have all the money in the world and be a very miserable person.
Yes.
You know,
You sure
you can have all the money in the world and your kids don't want to talk to you.
Mm-hmm.
You can have all the money in the world and your spouse is cheating on you.
Yeah.
Right. And so, like, what's your return on your investment?
Yeah.
And that's where energy comes into place.
Right.
Spouses of narcissists tend to always be depleted
Mm-hmm.
because it takes so much energy to deal with a narcissist.
I dated a narcissist one time, and I was so afraid to leave. We weren't married, but I was so afraid to leave because he told me no one would have me.
Uh-huh.
My family was bad. I was, this. I was divorced. I was that. And I had in my mind that no one would take me.
Mhm.
No one would ever have anything to do with me.
Mhm.
So it was that manipulation in it. I really did. It took a group of friends to go, what the hell are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
Get out. And
Mhm.
they did. And I wasn't married. So, but
Yeah.
that's easier said. That's just me, I mean,
Well, it is. I think it is very difficult to leave. Very
Mhm.
difficult to
Yeah.
leave any kind of abusive relationship because that also entails you admitting that you failed.
oh,
Right? I failed at my marriage.
it's okay.
Right. I always tell people, I'm like, so what? Like, we should be making mistakes in life, right?
Yes.
That's part of living. And if you're not making mistakes, you're not living your life.
No.
And it's okay. But for a person to have that acceptance of like, this did not work
Right.
and it's okay and it's ending. And then people have attachments to illusions. They're attached sometimes to the good times. And good times can be very good with narcissists. They can be fun. They can be engaging. They can have big, attractive, things about them. And that's part of what makes them so successful, right, in the business world.
Right.
But a lot of times people are just waiting for that moment.
Yes. For the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I encourage everyone to just listen to this. Listen to you because you have a podcast. Tell us about your podcast. Oh, my gosh.
So it's called How to Be a Human. And it's called How to Be a Human for what I said. I have a big passion to help people with the things that we weren't taught in school. And one of those things is I talk a lot about just all aspects of emotional intelligence or anything that has to do with being a functional person that we might not have a lot of information on, like even something as simple as like, why is it important to take care of your financial health, right? That's part of being a human that we're not taught in school that people feel kind of a taboo about talking about.
That's right.
Or how to put yourself first. And that's not being a narcissist, right?
Exactly.
That's being good to yourself.
Right.
If we don't respect ourselves first, how can we expect anyone to respect us?
Right.
And that's what I would, if you're listening and you're like, I think I might be married to a narcissist or I think I know a narcissist, ask yourself, do you feel like you can respect yourself when you're with that person?
She said it. Tatiana said it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how can we find you? Because you are absolutely amazing and I have so much more to talk about.
Oh, thank you so much. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Tatiana Miller. In fact, I think if you Google, I haven't done this in a while, but I think if you just Google Tatiana Miller, How to Be a Human, I come up. And then I have a website, mental health consulting online. And you can also reach me through that.
That's right. Absolutely. We're going to have all of these things in the show notes. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
Oh, my
Thank
gosh,
you.
this is amazing. And and I hope you'll come back.
I would love to.
My goodness, I would love to have you. And everyone, I hope you are taking something from this show today. And I just want to help. We all want to help each other. Yeah,
I know. You don't have to suffer. That's what I want people to know. Like, no matter what is happening in your life, right? You might be in the hardest, worst moment of your life. You can still thrive. Like, never let a person or a circumstance keep you from being the best that you can be.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I hope you all are listening, and I definitely know some of you that should be listening and hope that it helps. But everyone, keep on following along. This is on YouTube and, of course, Instagram and all of the platforms and things. Everything is in the show notes and everything. Y'all, you know what I say each week? Keep being fabulous.